If you're having trouble knowing how to respond to your partner that you hurt through betrayal, then this is the video for you, so don't go anywhere. Welcome to Recovery TV. I'm Josh Nichols, a licensed mental health professional, and I have a unique specialty in working with individuals and couples who have been impacted by betrayal trauma, which often includes some form of infidelity. I have an important message to share with you in this video on something that I call the compassionate response continuum, which I think ultimately is important for many couples who are having trouble communicating in their relationships, but it is especially important for the partner who hurt their significant other through an act or acts of betrayal. But before we begin, as always, I just want to remind you to please, if you like the videos that we're making, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to ring that bell so you can be notified when more videos like this are posted. So what is this compassionate response continuum all about anyways? So I came up with it after working with many partners who have been unfaithful in their relationships. So in an effort to do their part in helping their partner in the relationship heal, the unfaithful partners often find themselves at a loss for how to respond to their hurting partner who is typically dealing with an intense betrayal injury. What I have noticed with these partners, the ones that have been unfaithful, is that they tend to operate on one of two extremes. Either they are so shame-stricken or guilt-ridden that they become a doormat in the relationship, where they are subject to a lifelong prison sentence within the relationship itself. This is quite understandable given that many of these partners are often mortified by the pain and suffering they cause this person that they love. And if you're the injured partner watching this isn't meant to be insult to injury. I'm sure the thought has come to your mind that if this person really loved me, then they wouldn't have acted outside the relationship to begin with. So without getting too far into that, I'm just going to refer you to a couple other videos that I did. One on the 5 myths of infidelity, which I'll put right here in the cards. And then I did one here recently where I talk about infidelity as emotion management. And again, I'll put it right here in the cards, and you can watch those at your leisure. So back to the topic at hand. The other extreme is where they find themselves responding to feelings of offense, or as I like to say, trespass, in unreasonable ways. So in an effort to help them determine a more appropriate way to respond to their partner that was injured by their actions, I came up with the compassionate response continuum. So allow me to explain how it works. The first thing to recognize about the compassionate response continuum are the X and Y axes. The X axis, which I just call the alarm axis, is the one that runs horizontal on the continuum. So this axis is to help you measure that internal alarm. How do you know when a boundary's been crossed versus somebody just tiptoeing around it or poking around it or moving toward it? This axis is really to help you measure that. And as you can see, about the halfway point, there is a threshold. And once that threshold is crossed, now there's a trespass. So now the boundary has been violated. And based upon the severity of the trespass will also determine the type of response that you need to have. So the y-axis, which you see right there in the middle, is the compassion axis, which also ranges from high to low. So based upon the degree of alarm or trespass, you can also determine how much compassion you should have in your response. Now, as you can see, there are 4 quadrants that I identified that reflect the type of response that would be the most helpful based upon the level of alarm or trespass. The first quadrant is compassionate reassurance. There's typically a low level of alarm, which means there's also a lower level of compassion. It doesn't mean there's no compassion at all, but it's just a lower level of it. So you might think of this as sympathy. And sympathy is another way of feeling bad for someone, or think of it this way, it's hurting with that person or trying to feel their feelings. So as alarm increases, so does compassion. So now sympathy is moving on up that scale, and you're starting to experience empathy along with sympathy. So now not only am I feeling the pain of that person and hurting with them, I also am trying to understand what is going on for them, which is very difficult to do, so we often have to ask questions and inquire compassionately. So compassionate concern is kind of a form of worry. I'm worried about you. But then, once that threshold's crossed, and now we've entered into trespass, now we're in compassionate discernment. And now we're experiencing heavy empathy, and sympathy is starting to wane. So, this form of discernment, without the compassion, you might think of as a WTF moment. But with compassion, that's not something you're going to say to this person that you love, that you hurt with your actions. Compassion is what's going to hold you accountable to responding in a loving way. So, with compassionate discernment, there has been a trespass, there has been an offense, but it hasn't risen to a level that you are beyond inquiring with your partner what is going on for them. It's important to understand that in compassionate discernment, benefit of the doubt is a key player in how you respond to your partner, which means you're still asking a lot of questions, but you can also see how self-respect is starting to break through the surface. But ever now and then, there's an occurrence that is a high trespass, and now we have moved into self-regard. Compassion is moving away from empathy and into self-respect. Now, one disclaimer I want to give here is that throughout this whole process, you should have self-respect. In fact, self-respect is something that I work on with clients constantly. What does self-respect require of you? So you should be able to see self-respect throughout this entire process. But as we move into the quadrant of self-regard, self-respect should be evident. There's a lot of self-respect being shown here. So with an extreme trespass like name calling, different forms of emotional abuse, or even physical abuse, self-regard is the name of the game in that moment. These are the times where you have to stand up for yourself in a way that creates a lot of relational uncertainty. So when you have that level of self-regard and you communicate self-respect to your partner, it can create a feeling of insult to injury where you might be risking your partner coming to the conclusion that it's not good for them to be with you anymore. But compassionate self-regard requires you to show self-respect in a way that they likely haven't seen ever, maybe. And maybe you haven't either. And one thing to remember, if you're the unfaithful partner watching this, that yes, you did do something very hurtful. You did something that could cost you your relationship. But in the realm of recovery, it's important to understand that you do not cash in what makes you human because you did this thing that was so hurtful. You get to have feelings. You get to be offended. You get to feel hurt. And you get to speak up about it. But how you speak up about it is really important. That's why this is called the compassionate response continuum, not do whatever you want to do response continuum. So how is this supposed to be helpful to you? So I think it's important to go back to something we talked about earlier, where partners tend to want to respond in one of two ways, where they respond with their guilt and shame and they just allow themselves to be a doormat because that's what they feel like they deserve. Or they want to respond with offense when they feel some semblance of trespass, but they're responding to that offense of a trespass when sometimes there's not even a trespass. And even if there is one, it's often low level. At this juncture in my work as a betrayal trauma therapist, I believe that most of the time, unfaithful partners will often find themselves having to respond from the compassionate concern quadrant or the compassionate discernment quadrant. There will be times they have to respond from compassionate self-regard, but those are often rare. But that's where they want to move to immediately once they feel some inkling of trespass. So one way that you can utilize the compassionate response continuum is to genuinely ask yourself about the trespass itself. What you're experiencing from your partner, does the trespass warrant self-regard? Is a trespass of such an extreme that I need to basically abandon sympathy and empathy and focus heavily on self-respect? Or does it fall more in a compassionate concerned quadrant or compassionate discernment? So one of the challenges is that you have to determine your trespass continuum. At what point does an alarm become a trespass? At what point does a trespass reach such an extreme that you have to address the inappropriateness of your partner's behavior out of self-respect? You're going to have to determine that. And that's not easy to do on your own. So working with a therapist can be real helpful, or working with a recovery community, which if you're doing recovery, you should be a part of anyways. That might be a way for you to better gauge what a trespass is and what's not. I appreciate you sitting through all that. The compassionate response continuum is still a work in progress, and so as I do more with it, I'll try to post more videos about it. I hope to do a worksheet eventually on it. I also plan on writing a blog about it. Once I get that blog written, I'll make sure to go back in and put a link to it in the description of the video. Thank you for being here. I'll see you back next time.